Welcome to 40 Cray, a podcast by two almost 40-something guys whose adult lives and responsibilities really haven't eclipsed our love and zeal for hobbies and passions and fun, including video games and Warhammer, Uno, the playing card game, food, all kinds of things. I'm of course, Ben, aka LS Demon, and I'm joined by Tommy Bones.
Hello.
And that's how you know we're two different people, because if he said hello, I obviously can't be doing his voice.
I will drink water while you do the intro.
Okay, and as always, no, not as always. On this special occasion, never as always, we have a special guest star who's our local hobby Drukhari expert, Phil, aka Phildo.
Hello.
Phil, good to have you on the show. Great intro. You're a natural. Look at that.
Well, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, thanks, man. Honestly, actually, you are a natural, right? Because you've been a voice actor in the past, whereas Tom and I are just drunk hobby nerds.
Accurate.
Well, I have a demo at least.
Speaking of demo, that's a terrible segue, but we're going to go with it anyway. What's everybody drinking tonight?
I'm having a Victory IPA.
Ooh, Victory IPA, of course. Got to have the hops. Tom, what's in your cup today?
Currently, Founders All Day IPA Session Ale.
Sounds like two good choices. I had a little bit of a drinking experience this morning due to actually being able to go to an outdoor bar. So I am actually abstaining right now, but I am drinking Lidl organic orange strawberry banana juice.
Ooh.
To try to gain back electrolytes that I lost during the day. Well, tonight we have a very special episode. I mean, every episode is very special. You know, I don't want to hype it up too much, but it'll be good. We're going to talk about the Drukhari, aka the Dark-Eldar. As you know from all of our past episodes, Tom's core, his heart is in the Emperor's Children. I'm in Thousand Sons, but between us, we play a bunch of factions. But among them, we don't really do Dark-Eldar / Drukhari. So we invited Phil, who's not only a Drukhari enthusiast, but actually the local gatekeeper person to beat in our local game group due to how good his Drukhari lists are.
Well, at least they're good enough to beat you.
I mean, good enough to beat me, but let's be honest, a chimp who came in last in his class would probably still beat me at this game. But that's okay, because it's still fun. So, Phil, we had this a similar deep dive with my brother who plays orcs as his man and is huge about orcs. First question for you, when did you first get into Warhammer and what drew you to the hobby?
Well, if we're going to go all the way back, I guess when I was younger, I had a copy of Hero Quest, the board game that GW put out. And I really liked some of the miniatures there. There was like a Chaos Warrior, sort of. I thought they were really cool looking. And then I didn't interact with Warhammer proper until probably the mid-2000s with some of the video game properties, Dawn of War specifically.
Oh, yeah.
It was probably my gateway into the actual Warhammer universe, especially 40K. I spent some time with Warhammer Online as well, short-lived as it was. And as far as actually getting on the tabletop, Ben, you were the one who actually got me into it, so thank you. And also, you suck. Sincerely, my wallet.
That was a very serious letter. I don't know. Tom, I remember I was kind of the catalyst, I think, as you and I had been talking about it for a while, and then we got into Kill Team, so not too different, I don't think.
Yeah. Likewise. A lot of lying to one's significant others about how much your hobby costs.
Yeah, even just putting together kill teams for Drukhari, I had to buy, I think, 5 or 6 boxes.
Right. It's
not a great entry point to the series. I should have started with Harlequins or something like that.
Well, Phil, what I think is hilarious is, you and Tom actually both got the bug pretty hard. Like, we played Kill Team, all of us at different times. And then Phil, right around the corner after starting, I think you've already got like 5 or 6 teams, whereas Tom has started with the teams and then just started expanding out a Chaos collection that now includes, I think, 3 knights, right, Tom?
Yeah, got a Desecrator / Rampager and 2 Despoilers.
Nice.
And I just picked up the Chaos Battle Force Decimation Warband because I have a problem.
Well, I was only planning to start with to do 1 army, and then Ben had some extra Fire Warriors, Tau Fire Warriors, and I figured if I was going to have them, I was going to build a proper team, which you can't do without crisis suits and stealth suits and a whole bunch of drones. and some Pathfinders, and suddenly I had a whole nother carrying case full of minis.
That's how they get you.
Yeah, right.
So Games Workshop, you absolutely have to keep supporting Kill Team because it is such a gateway. But anyway, yeah, Phil, go on there.
At which point, I think by the time I was finished building the Tau, people were getting really fed up with playing against Rax. So I figured I had to start branching out a little bit and try some other armies. So I've picked up some Harlequins, some Genestealer cults. I went on eBay and got the Gellerpox infected team. Really like them. Not particularly competitive, but they're very fun. All the different rules you have to use. Like every single unit has a special rule associated with it. So it really keeps your opponent on their toes. And I'm actually in the process of collecting some Death Guard just to round out the collection for now.
Yeah.
Actually, I think, Tom, you're working on a Death Guard collection too, right?
Yeah, I just assembled and primed them. Yeah, I just got a box of Plague Marines and the push fit, easy to build Poxwalkers.
No Terminators, huh?
Nah.
Yeah, I ordered the box
no other, just nah. Fuck the Terminators. I'm not doing that noise.
I might never use them, but I find that I like building the larger models, and I have just enough room, I think, in my case for them. So I'm going to build the box of 5 Terminators just to have them.
Mm-hmm.
I will say Death Guard. So I do have a Death Guard army. Actually, Phil, you should know that because you crushed me in our last game. I was playing them. They are very fun to paint and put together. I think they were among my 2 favorite groups, maybe 3 favorite I ever painted. I love Tyranids because you could pick any color scheme, and they were really easy to contrast paint, which I loved. I loved my Thousand Suns because they're so intricate, and I always just loved their color scheme. But Death Guard, there's so many nooks and crannies that getting all those details is really interesting.
Yeah, I can't wait to weather them. Just all the rust and grime and grossness. It should be fun.
Well, maybe that's a good segue. Speaking of grossness, so Phil, we talked a little bit about what got you into the hobby. Obviously, video games, another great gateway. So hopefully we'll get some really good 40K video games at some point. Not dissing Dawn of War. Dawn of War is always fun. Beyond that, though, I know Drukhari is your main. So I'd love to know a little bit about, where that fascination came from and what drew you to the what did we call them, Tom? I know when Gabrielle was on the show, I think didn't we call them like sex elves or something?
Yeah, the elves that worship sex.
That's it. That's what we call them. They're certainly very explicit from a content perspective.
It's so much more than just sex, though. It's also pain. Sex
very
and pain.
True.
I mean, that's pretty much it, but it's 2 things. So to your question, I had basically started by borrowing your Death Guard, and I played my first probably half dozen games primarily with Death Guard. And when I was looking to get my own army, I wanted to do something a little different, and I really was drawn to the variety of units available for the Drukhari. As I mentioned, I had to buy 5 or 6 boxes to build all the possible iterations for my team. And it was all high mobility, low toughness, low armor, for the most part, with very few exceptions. I liked that it was very different from the Death Guard that I had been playing. I think it actually provided it was more of a challenge to learn them and to figure out a strategy that worked, as opposed to with Death Guard where you just sort of run up the middle and rely on your toughness and your armor, and you're disgustingly resilient to survive whatever comes at you. With the Drukhari, you have to really stay out of sight as much as possible and pick and choose your battles.
They certainly do require a completely different strategy and level of oversight to play versus Death Guard. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested because it really sounds like your decision to main them came more from, partially aesthetic, but partially just to do something different.
Well, yeah, exactly. Although at the time that I was doing it, also people were just starting to discover them competitively, and everybody was talking about rack spam at the time. So just building like a full army of racks, and it's basically at that point plays the same as the Death Guard, where you just wander up the middle and you weather all the fire that comes at you, with the exception that your guys really can't kill anybody. You rely on your auxiliaries, the mandrakes, and the incubi for that. So there is, I guess, a subsection of the Drukhari that can play that way. But I still feel I feel most drawn to the Kabalites. I really like the big guns, even if you can only take 1 or 2 of them.
I was stuck thinking about the big guns. I'm like, they got the Shredder. The Shredder's the one that's like a melter gun, right?
No, you're thinking of the Dark
that's
Lance, which is...
No, the Dark Lance is like the las can. Oh, the blaster is the melt-a-gun.
Splinter
You're
cannon?
right, the short-range one, yes. It's the blaster. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, then the splinter can... Well, so here's another interesting thing. It sounds like the... Do we have to call him Drukhari? Can I call him Dark-Eldar?
Go for it.
They are making some rules to Drukhari. So, for example, splinter cannon or heavy splinter rifle. What's that thing called, Tom?
Did a little look up. The blaster is the Melta.
So the blaster's the Melta and the Dark Lance is the las cannon. But the point that whatever the heavy bolter.
You're thinking of the splinter cannon.
Yeah, so that's going from rapid fire 3 to heavy 3, but it's 2 damage, right?
Right. Yeah, and it gets an extra point of AP as well.
Oh, okay. So, but that's a really interesting change because right now it's like pew 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 pew, and it's going to go from many bolts that can take out relatively low armored folks to a smaller number of bolts that can actually take out a marine equivalent in the right circumstances.
I still feel like with the change, I'd always take the Dark Lance over the Splinter Cannon because the reason to take the Splinter Cannon was because you could split your fire better, and you wouldn't have to waste a specialism to move it and avoid a malice to your shooting.
Right.
So now that it's a heavy, you have to park it somewhere.
Although not to get too on a tangent, but man, I know I've been talking to you guys about all the changes that Command Point and Glass Half Dead have been reporting on the Marines and the Pariah Nexus. You may need D2 weapon to actually take those guys out now.
I think you just need to play Marines.
We'll see. I was also reviewing some of the change leaks for the Drukhari for the new codex, and going back a little while to I think November of last year, there was a leak where the weapon for the Clavex and the Incubi, the Clave, is also getting updated to 2 damage, and it's strength +2 now instead of strength +1. So there's another 2 damage weapon in your arsenal, and all of a sudden, most people only play with the Clavex. They don't usually use an Incubus as well, but you might be running a few of them in the future. Strength 5, 3 AP, 2 damage with a melee weapon is pretty good, especially if you're getting 3 attacks with it base. And their weapon skill is apparently getting upgraded to 2-up.
But that's going to kind of nuke that whole power from pain thing, isn't it? Because now, I think on like the 3rd or 4th round, they hit on a 2-up as a bonus. Are they getting rid of power from pain, you think?
Probably not. Well, I don't know, but I wouldn't think so. I suspect that it basically means that you can suffer a flesh wound and still hit on a 2 after round 3. It basically means you're always hitting.
Like transhuman.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think I saw they might be doing that to witches as well. But it will be interesting to see when it all shakes out.
I mean, everything's going to be interesting. You got to kind of wonder if, at some point, are we going to get a full kill team breakdown change up? Because actually it does seem there were some hints in a recent Warhammer community article that it was possible kill team was going to get overhauled.
Yeah, that would be great. I'm a little concerned if they do it halfway through the rollout of the 9th edition codexes, so only half of the armies get updated. All of a sudden, everybody else is getting extra attacks, extra armor piercing, 2 damage weapons, and then somebody else is getting left in the dirt.
They have a tendency to do that.
Yeah, the dog agrees. Was that your dog, Tom, or your dog, Phil?
I believe that was mine. That is Conan the Corgi.
Conan the Corgi. Conan the Lady Corgi, which I think is an interesting, good for you, being,
It's 2021, girls can be Conan.
Girls can be Conan, girls can be whatever the F they want. Amen. All right, on that note, let's get back to Drukhari. So, Phil, since you started taking them over, even though it was more of a pragmatic decision, Vice, kind of the things that, when we were talking to Andrew, my brother, he talks about orcs, it's like they're his spirit animal. I don't think that's the case for you and Drukhari, am I wrong?
I'm here wearing black eyeliner right now.
Oh, that's done.
Full white face paint. I'm completely goth. No.
High as balls.
Definitely not.
Warp dust.
Yeah, it's very much not how my personality goes. But as I mentioned, I like the army. I like that it's a challenge. They're extremely maneuverable. Some of their weapons, when they do hit, like the Dark Lance, it will ruin your day, and it can kill pretty much anything on the board. But it's also very easy for your opponent to take off the board. Pretty much every single unit in the roster, with the exception of the Rax and the Grotesque, are toughness 3. So if someone hits you, they're forcing a save pretty much. And a lot of the guys have a lot of your units have 5-up saves. Mandrakes don't have a save, or I guess they have an invuln, but you're going to be rolling those saves a lot.
And then I know, like, when we play, your core for a while was that rack list, and then you changed it up to Cobbleites. Like, what's your favorite list to run? Not from, like, I want to win, but from a I'm going to have a good time tonight perspective.
I think I like souping the best. I like to take the specialists from each roster, just because there's so many options. It's fun to mix and match the like a witch with a rack with an ossifactor, witch with a dark lance. I'm probably always playing a Clavex because they're just amazing. It's the roster MVP by far. A couple of Mandrakes and a Night Fiend. Mandrakes because you can drop them behind enemy lines. I don't like... People have said this already. I'm not saying anything new here, but the fact that you don't get your roster, basically your roster bonus, if you're mixing witches with racks with Cobbleites is frustrating. I want to put the ball on the board. But if I'm trying to be a little more competitive, then I'd be probably playing a Cobblite roster right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think the versatility is pretty fun. I know, Tom, one of the reasons we always liked Heretics is you can be reasonably shooty or you can be very close combat-y, although neither really super great. I guess with the Drukhari, it feels like you can do both really well.
Yeah, like each of the Witch Covens or the Cobblite, they each have their own thing. Like the Coblites are shooty, the Witches are close combat, so you can sort of pick one and go with play to its strength.
I want to like Witches more. I think they're really neat models. The rules are really interesting, but they're way too fragile, and you lose too many of them on the approach. I found it really frustrating on open boards to play with them. I do very fondly remember, though, playing against a Novak Necron list, full Flayed One spam, and just destroying them. Because when the Witches get to close combat, they have a 3-up invuln. Most of their weapons are 1 damage, so you're not triggering regeneration protocols very often. It went my way pretty heavily. It was a memorable match.
Although we'll see how that goes because the Flayed Ones are going to get a bump too. Although actually, I think we did the math and it's more of a debuff than a buff. They get an extra AP, but in return they can't reroll all wounds anymore.
Yeah, losing the reroll of wounds is a big debuff to them, in my opinion.
Especially against the non-marine equivalents.
Yeah.
So, Phil, have you learned any like super sneaky tactics or strategies that you like to use with your Drukhari lists? Anything that I'm sure there have been some times where you've just like completely surprised us and rocked us with something unexpected.
I'm not sure if I've come up with anything that's unique. I love the variety of the tactics that are available to them, where you can fall back and still shoot even though your units can't fly, where you can or fire after moving, not fire after moving.
Fire and fade.
Move after firing. Thank you. Yes, fire and fade, where you can fire and then duck your Dark Lance, for instance, back into cover so that it can't be fired. They can't return fire, or use it to take a point that your guy couldn't quite get to. I love the variety of what you can do with it, even if most of the time you are using your command points for tactical rerolls. The fact that you have those sitting in your pocket is excellent, and it has to make your opponent think. If they know about Drukhari, then they have to always be worrying which one you're going to pull out.
What?
In fact, there's one, I don't think I've ever used it. I always forget about it, but there's a tactic called Taste of Pain. When a model from your kill team suffers a flesh wound, add 1 to the attacks characteristic of that model. So they get an extra attack, and they ignore the penalty hit rolls from any flesh wounds it suffered. So giving a witch or an incubus, for instance, or a mandrake an extra attack, and you ignore whatever flesh wounds it's taken, that's really powerful, and that's 1 CP.
I mean, it's a good point. Like everything you're saying, you got really good tactics, but you kind of have to be situationally aware to deploy them. You've got a mix of troops, and especially when you're souping, but even if you're not, they have hard checks and hard victories. So Clavex is awesome unless he gets caught in a shooty situation or unless somebody falls back from him and then he's completely nuked for a round. Your Mandrakes are great unless they're against kind of forced focus enemy fire. Your Cobbleites are good at a distance, but only a certain distance or a very specific kind of range. Your Witches, great in combat, but pretty papery. It seems like to play this team effectively, you really have to own the board and be very proactive about setting up those troops for the right kind of success. and have a strategy to run it in. You can't just have Death Guard type, like, hey, we're going to throw you in there and you'll probably survive a couple rounds, or orcs like, yeah, we'll just melee and they'll probably be okay.
Custodes.
Yeah, my beloved Custodes.
Yeah, and it helps. Every unit on your roster has at least 7 inches of movement. The witches get 8. So you can really run around and set yourself up for success if you're smart in the movement phase.
So what's your favorite matchup? Like, if you're a Drukhari, who's your favorite Perthan? Oh my gosh, boy, it's been a long day. Who's your favorite faction? That was what I was trying to say, faction. I said Perthan. What's your favorite faction to play against when you're playing them Dark-Eldar?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a specific favorite. As I mentioned, I really love that Necrons matchup because it's one of the few times I've used witches. I like them, but just watching them all die to gunfire is too frustrating. That's why I have the Genestealer called Kill Team for off weeks. I'd say I like playing them against Thousand Sons, partially because Ben, you play Thousand Sons a lot, and it's a good matchup. It's tough.
Tough but winnable for both sides, really.
Yeah. I guess I like playing against orcs too, because orcs are just great all the time. Even when you're losing to them, they're just a ton of fun.
True. Yeah, that's true.
That's probably my favorite matchup.
It's just the orc chaos.
Yeah, in general. Like, what was it, last week? I was playing against an orc team, and I was playing Genestealer cults at the time, but I lost 2 aberrants to rocket launchers. Like, 2 turns in a row, the rocket launcher killed an aberrant.
Yeah, the listeners know when we had Andrew on talking about orcs, he actually has an orc list which he built, again, not to be competitive, just to have fun, around the Death Skulls having tons of rerolls and having an ammo run, and was able to basically get a rocket launcher that for 1 CP can fire twice and have a reroll hit for each time. And, with 4 rolls, even if you need a 6 to hit, like statistically, there's a pretty good chance, better than 50%, that you're going to win, or to hit, I should say. And it's hilarious when it does. Like, Phil, you and I, and actually Tom, this is a huge theme of this. If you want to learn how to win, go check out Command Point or Glass Half Dead or Goonhammer. If you want to learn how to dick around and have fun, we're the guys to go to. And for that, build an orc list where you're just trying to rocket launch at people.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, the second time he did it to me, he didn't even have to use a reroll. It just natural 6 on the first throw. It was horrific. I was running a 7-unit roster because I wanted to just put a bunch of aberrants on the board, and every time I lost one, it was like, it was terrible, but hilarious.
So to confirm, by the way, Andrew with his orc, if he can do a Death Skulls reroll and an ammo rent reroll, and he pays 1 CP for Daka, he's got a 52% chance of hitting you with a rocket launcher. If you're obstructed or long range. If you're closer, it's significantly better.
Mm-hmm.
And then he can save his CP for the wound roll. He can reroll that, right?
He can reroll the wound roll. Well, with Death Skulls, he can do that.
Oh, true. That's broken.
So suddenly, it's not though, because it's so flimsy, and if you just take it seriously, you can quite easily neutralize it, but nobody ever does. Much to our hilarity. Okay, so if you're not obscured or long range, he's got an 80% chance of hitting you. Those
are good odds.
That's like, Phil, when you use your stupid recon drone to kill my sorcerer in turn 1, even though he's behind cover because of your dumb recon drone.
Pathfinders are broken too. Yeah, I guess if I had a second main, it would be Tau. But I do love the Drukhari above all others.
So, Tom, have you, when you're playing, have you played against Tau or Drukhari, and have you noticed any specific obstacles or challenges playing against them?
So I've played each faction, and neither time my opponent's lists were optimized. I think when I played Tau, he just took one of the suits that has 3 flamers, and just let me get into close combat, and I tied up the suit with a cultist that refused to die. Like, he should not have survived so long, but he was basically just kept getting into combat and not dying. And then all of his rail rifles, he let me get into close combat with them. So that was an easy win. And the Drukhari, all he brought was mandrakes.
That's the tournament winning list from just a couple months ago. That's what everybody was using.
Just all mandrakes?
Yeah.
Yeah. The meta switched from racks to mandrakes a few months ago, and they're apparently nasty, but you can beat them.
Yeah, maybe he didn't know how to use them then, because...
What? Why is it so hard to kill them? Like, they're not that strong.
Well, they're -1 to hit at all times.
Yeah.
They have a 5-up invuln, so you can't AP them.
Great.
They get 3 attacks base in close combat, strength 4, AP -1, and they have a gun that is assault 2 with an 18-inch range that has exploding 6s on the wound roll. So they're pretty good at both melee and ranged combat, and they're hard to hit unless you can, plop that crisis suit with the 3 flamers down right in front of them.
So what is the meta? Like, how do they make?
Well, the way that they were beaten the way they were beaten in the tournament was it was an Astra Militarum team with all the Blackstone Fortress models. I would also say flamers are really good against them. Once you get inside their Bale Blast range, if you can flamer them before they can charge you from out of 8 inches or 12 inches in the future. 12-inch flamers are broken.
That's gonna be rough.
Yeah, you're gonna have to charge from out of sight. That's definitely a nerf to mandrakes in general. But the fact that on turn 1 you can basically use a 1 CP tactic to drop up to 3 mandrakes behind enemy lines, as long as they're not
anywhere on the board, really. Yeah, totally.
Anywhere on the board outside of 5 inches from an enemy. So you drop them either behind cover or out of line of sight. Turn 2, your power from pain bonus is to reroll failed charges. So you have them in close combat on turn 2. So they're very good at that. But again, toughness 3, so once you land a hit, really the answer is volume of shots, really. 5-up invuln is only so good.
Yeah, again, that's why I think like the 4-up racks are just they're what, like 8 points, is that right?
Yeah, 8 points.
So I mean, for 8 points you get somebody who's pretty good in combat with a bunch of attacks, who's wound on a 4-up. They're it's toughness 4-up invuln. It's such a good deal. There's for pound, I can't think of any other 8-point fodder that's anywhere near that. Like, they wreck my Zangors. They're reasonably good against orcs. Tyranids don't really stand a chance unless you're getting your big bugs out. But even then, you crushed mine pretty easily. So anyway.
And they still have that 7-inch movement, so they can move around the board. They can take points.
Right.
You're looking at huge
and they get
advances there.
some liquefier guns and shit.
Yeah.
Armor
D3 armor-piercing flamers. It's great. If you, depending on how you build your roster, you can have up to 4 liquefier guns on the board.
Liquefier guns. All right. Enough about tabletop. I'm tired of hearing about how good they are. They are beatable. Lots of flamers. Quantity of shots. If you're playing against witches, keep them back. If you're playing against mandrakes, I don't know, get flamers that are 12 inches long. Let's talk about lore, guys. Tom, my question, I start with you. Now, you're an Emperor's Children guy, self-professed, because, as you said, they're all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah.
I would argue so are the Drukhari.
Yeah, for different reasons.
Yeah.
So why not? What's different about them versus Emperor Children that repulses you, where your beloved Slaneshi folks bring you in like a longtime friend giving you a gentle hug?
I don't know. I think I was drawn to Chaos, I guess, Undivided first. They grabbed my interest, and then sort of narrowed my scope from there.
But it was always Chaos.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the corrupted humans or transhumans, I guess. Corrupted by the forces of the warp.
I think for me, when they came out, I remember it. I think it was like, Phil, we figured out it was like 98, 99, right?
Yeah, 98 was when the 3rd edition Codex came out.
And I remember they were just so different because, Eldar up until that point had been these like primary colors. Most of the armies really were. Like, if you look at orcs back, it was, red, black and white checks or very yellow for bad moons. Space Marines, you had the Ultramarines in bright blue. You had Dark Angels in very green. But just, like very chromatic color schemes. And then the Dark Eldar kind of come out in this kind of purplish black where everything in the background is like green and looks like toxic. And it was just such a different and yet still so grimdark addition to everything else that was going on. I don't know if you guys did, when they kind of did break the mold. Do you remember? Were there any models that stood out, or any impact that had on you and your conception of some of the other factions?
Well, I obviously wasn't playing back then. My first experience with them was when they were released as an expansion to Dawn of War.
Yeah.
And I was already, honestly, in that game, I was in love with the Tau. I like their aesthetic and the very, very long range aspect of their army in that particular game. It's how I like to play. So I messed around with the Dark-Eldar, but they didn't click for me at the time. So I'm a relatively recent convert.
Tom, what about you? Any big takeaways from when you were first kind of introduced to the Dark-Eldar back in the day?
No, I liked the fact that they were kind of like, well, we're fucked, so we may as well just embrace, do what we want to, because, Slaanesh is going to eat our souls anyway, so what the hell.
Their reaction isn't really even about Slaanesh. It's just the same thing they were doing before when they gave birth to him.
They just don't care.
For the Drukhari in Commorragh, it's life as it was before. Except if they take a break from their hedonism and their torturing, then they do wither away and they turn into like these ghoulish half beings, basically. But they like it.
It's, Phil, you're kind of, I think that's a good point. Like in the lore, right, so the fall of the Eldar Empire and the birth of Slaanesh was around 30,000. Kind of, I think, obviously before the Horus Heresy, because the Eye of Terror was already a thing at that point, and that's what came from Slaanesh. But there was this obvious bifurcation, if you count Exodites, trifurcation of Eldar, and you had the craft world, which were like definitely still like haughty and condescending, but like at least a little apologetic. Like, ooh, we should probably stop that stuff. And then you had these other guys who just turned into it. It's kind of like when you're already drunk, like, well, fuck, I guess I'll just have 8 more drinks because I'm gonna feel like shit tomorrow, no matter what. But I think also in the 10,000 or 12,000 years in the universe since that happened, like they've become even more depraved. So like a lot of the flesh crafting and homunculi activities weren't as pronounced and terrible as they are in the current universe as they were when the Eldar fell.
Well, yeah, they have really long lifespans, and if there's a homunculus around, then they have eternal life basically, or nearly. So they're the same leaders. They've just gotten really good at it. Also, you have their society has basically been led by one person, theoretically, more or less, since the birth of Slaanesh.
You talking about Vect?
Yeah, he's been running their society for thousands of years at this point.
Which you gotta wonder, like, why does he even want to do that? Like, I get the whole he's power hungry, but after like 10,000 years, you'd be like, I kind of enjoy the sex murder thing, but maybe I'd rather do it in like a private villa somewhere in Commorragh.
The second he releases his death grip on the leadership of their people, he gets murdered, painfully. Or, well, he probably would survive. They'd probably keep him alive to torture over and over again as a symbol of status for whoever takes over next.
Yeah, so you mean like he's basically created like a positive feedback loop where no matter what he does, he's unable to extricate himself because he'll just be brought back in.
Yeah, although I don't think from what I've read that he wants to. I think he's perfectly happy running everything.
Man, but 10,000 years is such a...
I mean, for a human it would be, but he's a sex elf. So
Man has a point.
And we should explain for the listeners too. If you're not familiar with the Drukhari, essentially there is a lot of torture in their fiction. So if you ever do want to read some of the Black Library books, like, fair warning, there's a lot of nasty torture and like almost like Hellraiser level of body horror, because they essentially, to feed Slaanesh, they have indulged their depravity, so they actually will extract pain from people and use that to, I guess, how does it work? I mean, Tom, you're kind of the chaos expert. Was it just like feed Slaanesh and then Slaanesh doesn't eat their souls or something?
No, he probably still will.
My understanding of it is that he is feeding on their souls slowly, Because they're spending so much time in the webway, he can't just eat them. But they basically replenish themselves off of other people's suffering.
So really, they're slowly being drained, and it's like if you stab a guy or do whatever Ramsay was doing in Game of Thrones, that like it's like a vampire, like they leech off of that.
Exactly.
So how does if you're in Commorragh and you're just like a Dark Eldar dude, like you're just the Dark Eldar, I don't know, like Taylor, like people come in and he fixes their pants. Wait, does he go actively like torture people? Is there like a drink that's like, haterade that's distilled from pain that he drinks? Like how does that work?
I think, honestly, I'm not entirely sure how it happens for the people in the lower echelons of society. The aspiration is to join a cabal, to join a cabal for a regular Drukhari, and to rise through the ranks to eventually be able to go on raids into real space. But there's plenty of depravity that goes on in their society amongst them, and probably just being in Commorragh is enough to pick up just sort of like a contact high from all the horrible things going on around you. And underneath you, where all the homunculi labs are, that's under the city more or less. So that must waft up just fumes of depravity.
Yeah, according to I'm doing a search of various Reddits, and it sounds like we never really in the fiction hear how they feed. It just kind of seems to just generally, like you said, it's like a contact high, or the fumes of emotion kind of just like fuel them.
And again, there is lots of street warfare, just murder and backstabbing all the time. There's a blurb in the Codex about the incubi that say that they basically they're so focused on, they're basically monks, they're warrior monks effectively. And the nicest thing it says about them is that they would almost keep their word.
Yeah.
Almost.
Yeah. Probably.
So other than Vect, what do you guys have favorite Dark Eldar characters?
There are a bunch of them that are interesting. I guess since, as I mentioned, I'm relatively new to it, I need to spend a little more time before I have a lot of favorites. But there's, I gotta dig through the Codex real quick here, but there's...
Oh, Drazar?
That's probably the one I was thinking of.
Master of Blades, like the fallen Phoenix Lord?
Drazar the Gazarian.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, he doesn't talk, he just kills people. That's all he does, and everyone respects the crap out of him. He's
like super bad. Wait, Tom, what did you call him?
Drazar the Gazarian.
Oh, is that a Ghostbusters reference? I was like, oh, that's cool. Tell me more about that lore. Oh, Ghostbusters. What about, do you guys remember, actually, Phil, you won't. Tom, do you remember there was like a character called like Krulog the Vile that I think was like Cruella de Vil, was like some kind of play off of her. I'll send a picture in the chat. She looked really dumb. Lilith Helsbrex.
Yeah, they just came up with updated her model, right?
She's like the head Hecatrix, or succubus. She's the head succubus of the largest witch cult, or coven? Which coven? Ugh, I'm getting it all mixed up now.
Undisputed champion of the gladiatorial arenas of Commorragh.
Yeah, there's also another one that's interesting is Lady Aurelia Malice, who leads the Cabal of the Poison Tongue.
Oh, is that Vec's daughter?
No, I guess, consort.
Oh,
and
okay.
They had a falling out, and now she's leading a competing Cabal they've actually left Commorragh, and they're kind of waiting and watching to see what happens. She doesn't like him at all.
Then who is this?
She's turn the page.
With the one I sent the picture of, or the one Phil's talking about?
The picture.
It's here. I'll send you I'm trying to find more. There's not a whole lot of it. It's Krulog the Vile.
She looks like a Spider-Man villain.
She totally does. I don't really know what they were going for.
Oh yeah, I see that. Yeah, there are lots of leaders and aristocrats in the Drukhari society, but Vect is the big one, and the homunculus Urian Rockhearth.
That's right.
I'm saying that correctly. He's the real body horror guy. He's the king of body horror.
Yeah, he's a pretty fucked up dude. Although I think it's funny that here's something that'll bring both you guys together. In a story, I think it was a short story, but it's also just part of the lore. Fabius Bile was captured by homunculi, and then he's so fucked up, he actually not only taught them shit, but they were freaked out by him. So they let him go, and then he taught them some stuff, they taught him some stuff, and they kind of had like a a con, and then after the con, they're like, okay, I guess you can go stay in touch or don't. You're pretty fucked up.
Sounds about right.
Yeah, he studied in one of their towers for a while. Yeah.
And they're like torturing him, and he's like, you could be doing that better. I also like there's another fiction where I think Vect was in danger of like losing his relative stranglehold on power. So he semi-tricked, semi-invited, semi-orchestrated a space marine invasion of part of Commorragh that took out like a couple of his rivals. So I forgot what he did, but I think he told the salamanders like one of the tools of Vulcan was hidden in a part of Commorragh where his rivals were. So like the entire salamanders just showed up and started like flaming shit. And he was like, oops.
The city isn't just a single city the way that we normally think of it. It's like a series of pocket dimensions that are all kind of tacked onto each other and all have gateways that go between them. And there was one point where he had a strong rival in another pocket realm, and he dropped an Imperial battleship on the city, that part of the city, and just obliterated the whole thing. Yeah, he does this a lot. He faked his death, and at his funeral, he basically had a bunch of Harlequins and Kabbalites and witches come out and assassinate everyone who attended his own funeral, and then they resurrected the loyal ones. So he still killed them, but then he brought them back.
Pretty fucking impressive. I mean, in terms of like just as planned, he's definitely up there.
Yeah.
You know, like you got like Ahriman, he's pretty good at that, although he tends to get bamboozled every now and then. You got Sarkar Creed from Cadia. You got, I guess, Zinch in general, the Emperor. Like, who else is like a just as planned? There's a bunch of them.
There's a couple of Tau guys. There's like 2 or 3 Tau strategists.
I will say, like, one of my favorite parts about Dark-Eldar, I'm glad they added them to the official kind of fluff canon, because, you know, they had like Eldar Corsairs and, you know, pirates, and then like, hey, you know, we need something sicker. Because these chaos guys are bad, but we need something else kind of with a condescending tone to it, because we need another bad guy that people can hate. You know, I mean, if you remember, he was like the one that Vulcan stood up to and fought against, and they're really pretty douchey guys. Like, they take slaves and they torture people. It's almost like cartoon evil at times in a gross, like, you know, hedonistic Hellraiser way.
And he did originally start as just the largest of the port cities in the webway, so all the pirate metaphors are appropriate. It's like a free port, you know. Tortuga.
So that's the other thing. It's like Tortuga, but like originally, I think Commorragh, it was like, oh, it's a city, and then over time it became like, oh no, it's got 3 suns. How fucking big do you have to be to have 3 suns?
They're dying suns, though. Some of the other pocket realms that are attached to it also have their own suns. It's not just the ones in the main section. We've captured suns all over the place.
But that would mean that the webway, it's an interesting thing, because it makes the webway hard to understand. Is it tunnels? Because if it has a sun, let alone multiple suns, you're talking millions of miles, you know, in length. Here, let's just out of curiosity, do you guys know what the diameter of our sun is?
I do not.
865,000 miles. Okay, so that's less than I thought. But if we look at what's our orbit around the sun, right? Orbit diameter of Earth. So the sun is 865,000. The distance from Earth to the sun, which is an astronomical unit, is 93 million miles. So we are 93 million miles from the sun. So if you're in Commorragh and you have 3 suns, triangulate a course, which is, if they're dying stars, probably not that far, but certainly in the tens of millions of miles away.
Far enough to not be trapped in their own orbits.
Right.
Yeah, the city is absolutely gigantic. I'm trying to look up the exact the description of it, but basically it's not just a city. It houses the population of like multiple planets, and it's because it doesn't exist in our dimension. It's just the whole thing is obscene. Here's the quote: "It's complex on a dimensional scale, a monolithic and ever-changing tangle of impossibilities that could no more be accurately mapped." Could no more be accurately or comprehensively mapped than could the currents of the warp themselves. It's just a wild place, man.
I mean, dude, it sounds like a great place for a bachelor party.
Yeah. Might not come out again, but definitely have a good time.
Or if you do, you'll be like a husk of your former self. Like, no, literally, you will be a husk because there will be no meat left inside of your skin sack. Well, as always, this has been a fun trip down memory lane. Phil, any departing thoughts about Drukhari before we call this one a successful episode? This has been fun. It's been cool talking to you guys. Thanks, man. And with that, we'll bring ourselves to a close. Of course, Tom, what do we always say?
Suck it.
There is that. But we also say mash the like and subscribe button. And other things, too. Do we have like 8 catchphrases, Tom, for this part in the show? And yet we never remember any of them.
Good fight, good night.
Adios, muchachos.